Welcome back to another session in Java Fundamentals. In the last class, we have seen one of the looping structure, and that is a while loop structure. Today, we are going to see one another looping structure, and that is called as do while. Now, you notice that both of them sounds alike, but both of them works slightly differently. Now, we know that the while loop is a pre-tested loop that tests the condition at the beginning of the loop, whereas do while is a construct which tests the condition at the bottom or at the end of the loop. So, unlike in the while loop, you just enter into the loop once you pass this statement do. So, once the control passes the do statement, the control will be in the body of the loop. The body of the loop is executed as long as the while condition is true. However, you notice that the while condition that is put up here is at the bottom of the looping structure. So this loop simply enters, and then before going or before exiting out, it will test the condition. If the condition is true, the loop will be repeated, and this process of repeating the loop will continue as long as this condition holds. When the condition becomes false, the control is taken out to the next statement following the while loop. Because the condition is tested at the bottom or at the end of the loop, it is also called as post-tested loop. So we also call it as a post-tested loop, post-tested, whereas the while loop is called as pre-tested. Okay, it is also called as exit controlled loop. Sometimes it is called as exit controlled loop, whereas the while loop is called as entry controlled loop. What is the difference between the exit controlled or post control is the control or the condition is tested when the loop wants to exit. So you know very well, you start the loop from here, you start executing all the statement. When it comes for the loop to exit out, or when it comes for the control to exit out, the condition is tested. Because we don't test the condition right at the beginning, the statement that is written in this body of the loop will be executed at least once. This is one major difference between the do while and the while statement. In the while statement, as I've already told you, the body of the loop may not be executed even once. So, in the while loop, which you have already seen, if the condition is false right at the beginning, if the condition is false right at the beginning, the control will simply come out of the loop without executing the body of the loop even once. It simply ignores this statement and then goes out of the loop. The condition is false right at the beginning. So there is a chance that in the while loop, the body of the loop may not be executed even once, whereas that thing does not happen. Even if this condition happens to be false, the body of the loop will be executed at least once. So that is why uh, this is called as a post tested or exit tested control. Okay. So how does this particular looping structure works? So in the do while loop, the control enters the body of the loop and executes the body at least once. Okay. And if the expression is true, the loop will be repeated, and this process will continue as long as the condition holds. When the condition becomes false, the loop terminate. Okay. As usual, the condition that you are writing over here must evaluate to be a Boolean value. It must finally lead to either true or false. You can't write the integer expression or any other type of expression. So the expression finally has to end up as a true or false after valuation. So here we have a simple example. Int n is equal to 10, and you simply enter here as long as n is greater than 0. You repeat this loop, and in the inside of the loop you just decrease the value of n. Let's see that in action. We are going to go to the NetBeans, and we were here in the program. Let me slightly delete this. I'm going to remove the breakpoint by clicking on this dot here. I'm going to set the value of n is equal to I is equal to 1, and I'm going to say you are out of do while loop. So how do I write it? So I start with the do open bracket, and I can write anything. I'm going to write so value is, and I'm going to print the value of I, and because I've already talked about it, you need to do something inside the loop that will make the condition false. So I'm going to increase the body of the I value, and in the while condition I am going to just check while I is less than or equal to 5. So this is how I write it. So I first write the do statement followed by the flower bracket, and close the flower bracket, then write while, and inside the parenthesis I am going to write the condition. Let me run it first, and let's see the output here. And what you notice when this particular program runs is that you're going to see the 5 values. I'm going to just zoom it for you. You're going to see the 5 values printed one after the other, and then finally you are going to see you are out of the while loop. Let me demonstrate this with putting a break here. So I'm going to click at this point to put a break, and then I'm going to run this. So I start with this. You notice that the value of I happens to be did I put it here? Okay, let me press F7, and the I is executed. Now I is 1. So you notice that it is directly inside the do statement. So it goes to the do statement. It's going to print this one. If I press you know very well F7, it will take me to the print line statement. I'm going to come out of it. So it has printed the value of I, which happens to be the value 1. Now I will be incremented. I is 1 now. I plus plus, that is I is equal to I plus 1, will make I is equal to 2, and I'm going to press it. You notice what is going to happen. I'm going to press F7. It's going to go over here, and you notice that I value is now 2. If I check this statement happens to be true. Now because this statement is true, the while loop, the do while loop is going to go back, and it's going to repeat this statement again. Let me do that, and I'm going to press F7, and you notice that the loop has gone back, and it is now repeating the body of the loop again. So in this case, it's going to print the value of I, which happens to be 2 this time. So I'm going to press F7, and I'm going to come out of it. So if you notice the output here, in the output you are going to see that the value 2 has been printed, and then now the I plus plus statement is going to be executed. I is now 2, I plus 1 is going to be 3. So if you notice now I value has been incremented to 3, Again, the condition is tested if I put the evaluate this expression happens to be true, and the control now will go back to the body of the loop again. I'm going to press F7, and you notice that this is the next repetition that is happening. So it goes again. Now let me press F7, and it's going to print the value of I, and if you notice that the value of I is printed again, which happens to be 3. So it has printed the value of I, which is 3. Now I will be incremented. I is 3. I plus plus is going to make I is equal to 4, and you notice I is equal to 4. 4 is less than 5, which is true, and the loop will repeat. So again, you notice that the loop has repeated one more time, and it is coming back again. It's going to print the value of I, which is happens to be 4. So if you notice, it will enter into the print line statement, and it's going to I'm going to come out of that, and you notice that it has printed the value of I, which happens to be 4. Now I plus plus I is equal to I plus 1. That is going to be 1 greater than 4, which is nothing but 5. If you evaluate this one, I is not less than 5, but I is equal to 5. So this loop will repeat one more time. If I press F7, you notice that the loop still has repeated, and this will be the final execution of this particular loop. It's going to print the value of I as usual. I press F7 and just come out of this loop, and you will notice that it has printed and you notice that it has printed up to here. Now I plus plus will make I is equal to 6. I'm going to run that thing. Now if you notice, the value of I is sorry, I just pressed F6, but I think you get it. I value has been instead of F7, I pressed F6, and what would have happened is I plus plus would have made the incremented the value of I by 1, and what will happen is after that let me see whether it goes with the F7. Okay, I actually accidentally pressed the F6 rather than F7, so it actually completed the entire loop. So, but I'm going to just explain it rather than repeating it one more time. So I will be incremented by 1, and this time I value will be 6. 6 is not less than or equal to 5, and what is going to happen, this condition is false, so it's going to come to this statement, and it's going to print that statement, and that's what you are going to see it here, that it has actually completed the execution. Now if you run it, it will give you a wrong answers because it has already completed the program. So let's go to the next part, and that is why do we have to use a while loop? Most of the time we use a while loop to create a simple menu. Okay, for example, we give the choice to the user, like if you press 1, if statement will be there. If you press 2, something will be there. If you press 3, and so on. We show the menu to the user and ask the user to enter their choice, and this we will repeat it as long as they don't press something which is beyond the menu values. So this is the idea that we usually use it. So this is a place where do while loop is most frequently used. Now let's look at one other type of condition, one other type of iterating statement, and that is the for loop. Okay. So for loop is again a repetitive construct that you can use it to execute a set of statement repeatedly again and again. However, the difference between the for and while loop is, or for and do while loop is that the do while or while loop, we don't have the control on the exit. Now we may not be knowing prior whether when the loop is going to exit. For example, when I write a while loop, there may be chances that the condition may be false after one iteration, or the condition may become false after two iteration or three iteration. I usually, when I have a doubt or when I'm not very sure right at the beginning how many times this loop is going to be repeated, then I can go for while or do while loop. But if I'm for sure that this loop is going to be executed for 5 times or 10 times, if I know the specific number of times the loop has to be executed, in that case I can go for while loop. So while loop is used when you know that the loop will be executed for a specific number of times. So when you know exactly how many times a loop is going to get executed, you can always use the while loop. And when you are not very sure how many times the loop will be executed, so loop may execute 1 times, loop may execute 10 times, loop may execute 6 times, you are not very sure about that. In such a situation, use the while or do while loop. The syntax of a for loop may look a bit complicated, but it is easier. So there are three sections in the syntax. First section is the initialization, which is followed by a semicolon. Then we have the second section, that is the condition, which again is followed by the semicolon. And we have the last section that is called as the iteration, out of which the initialization is executed. Whatever you write over here will be executed only once. This will not, initialization happens only once. Then onwards, this part will not be touched. Whereas the condition and iterations will be tested or executed again and again. So how does the for loop works? As you notice, a for is again pre-tested or entry tested loop like while loop, with the small difference. In the while loop, there was no provision for initialization. And what we do at the initialization, we usually initialize the variable at this point, like I is equal to 0, I is equal to 1, or kind of this. Usually these values, that is I, generally taken I, j, k, are the generally taken letters. These are called as loop control variables, which control how many times the loop will be executed. So we usually initialize the control variables like I equal to 0. We do that thing. However, in the for loop, you are given a provision to even declare a variable and then initialize it. This is also allowed in for loop. Also, you can initialize more than one variable. For example, if you want to initialize two variables, so you can say that I is equal to 0 and j is equal to 5. You can do that, provided you separate the variables or separate the initialization by a comma. So put a comma between two of them and separate the initialization. You can initialize any number of variables over here. As told you, as I have told you before, the initialization occurs only once. So this, whatever you write at this particular point, will be executed only once in the during the for loop. So how does the for loop works? So it will first initialize the variable, and then it will test for the condition. Now the condition can be any Boolean expression that you can write, or any expression that boils down to be Boolean has to be written over here. For example, I can test the condition I less than 5. This is one condition, and you know very well this works out to be Boolean. So the for loop first initializes the control variable. In generally, it need not be always control variable, but generally it is the control variable. It initializes the control variable, tests the condition of the loop. If the condition happens to be true, then it will execute the body of the loop. Once the body of the loop is completed, it comes back again. Then it will go for this statement. So whatever you write here will be executed. Okay, so this is not iteration, it is actually increment or decrement. Okay, so here generally you either increment the variable or you decrement the variable. So this statement will be executed once the body of the loop is executed. After that, after incrementing or decrementing, it will again test the condition. If the condition is true, body of the loop is executed, and again this step repeats. So let me explain it one more times for you. When the control comes at the for loop, it will test the initialization. It will do the initialization first and then test for the condition. If the condition is true, body of the loop is executed. Once the body of the loop is executed, it will go for the iteration, wherein it will either increment or decrement the control variable. After that, it will again test for the condition. If the condition happens to be true, the body of the loop will be executed one more time, and once the loop body has completed, it will again come back to the iteration, perform whatever that is written in the iteration statement, again test the condition. If the condition is true, again the same thing is repeated. However, when the condition is false, the loop is exited out. So this is how the for loop will work. Let me demonstrate this one with an example. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say you are out of a for loop, because I'm explaining about the for loop. So let me show this in an example. So we write the for. If you press the control space, you will notice that there are many different options for loop in Java. But let me start with it. So you can say int j equal to 0. You can do that. I equal to 5. So what did I do here is you notice that I did something like this, a comma separator. Okay, I'm going to get an error there. Okay, and it is going to say that you are not to initialize that, but I will just you can do this one, but let me not go into complication first. Let me start with the I is equal to 1. So let me start the loop simply by not giving you something that is going to confuse you. So first part, I have initialized the variable. Next one, I am going to test for the condition as long as I is less than or equal to, I'll make it as 4, then I plus plus. So what is this first part? First part is the initialization. Second part is the condition. And third part is the increment or decrement. That's iteration. You write the body of the loop. You can write anything in the body of the loop. Oops, I supposed to write yes out, not D out. And I'm going to say value is plus I. Okay, that's all. I don't have to do this I plus plus here because this I plus plus is taken care at this point. I plus plus is done at this point, so I don't need to write that. Plus plus or minus or anything, loop counting need not be done at this junction. So this is how neat the for loop will look like. I'm going to just press control over here. I'm going to run that, and what you notice is we are there at this particular point where I value is not yet initialized. So if I press F7, what it has done two things. I can't slow down and ask it to do one thing at a time. It has initialized I is equal to 1. That's done only once. Then it has tested the condition whether I which is 4 is I which is 1 is less than 4. The condition is true. It's going to execute this statement. I'm going to just execute this, come out of that, and if you notice in the output value 1 is being printed. Now the loop has gone back and it is going to test, it's going to increment I plus plus and then test for the value of I. So I plus plus, if you notice I is 1, I plus plus will be 2, 2 less than 4. This is what it's going to do. I'm going to just press F7. I can't show that thing in slow motion. So this is what it has done. I has been incremented to 2. 2 is less than 4, and this condition has been is happens to be true. 2 is less than 4. That's why it is there in this statement. If I press F7 and then come out of it, you will notice that value 2 has been printed. Then let's go to the next thing. It has completed this loop, and now again it will go back. I will be incremented to I plus plus. I value is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3. It will again test the condition. If the condition is true, it's going to execute the body of the loop. Let me try that thing. I'm going to do it very quickly. It will do both the statement. I has been incremented to 3. Value of 3 is less than 4, which is boolean true, and this statement will be executed. I'm going to just press F7 and come out of it, and you notice value 3 has been printed. Now again it is going to go back to the looping construct, and then here it's going to test, it's going to increment I to the value 4, and it's going to test whether 4 is less than or equal to 4. If the condition is true, it's going to execute the body of the loop. Let me try that, and you notice that I value is 4. 4 is equal to 4, which is true, and it's going to execute this statement. So let me come out of it, and you notice that it has printed the value 4. Now the loop has come back. It's going to increment the value of I by 1, which is going to be 4 plus 1 is going to be 5. It's going to test for the condition, and you know very well this time the condition will be false, and that's why it's going to go to this line. So let me try that thing. So when I do it, the control has simply come out of here because the I value happens to be 5. This statement is false, and that's why it is going to print this line. And when I come back, you will notice that it has printed everything. This is how the for loop is going to work. A very simple loop, but it looks complicated. A few things that you can do. Let me go over here and stop the program execution. If you start doing a lot of things, it will take you to all the steps, which is not really required. I can do like this. Instead of writing int I can simply write int I here. I can declare and create the variable that's there. Also, if I have int I comma j, I can semicolon, I can say j equal to 5, I is equal to 10 by comma separation. This is valid. I'm what I'm doing now here is I am doing initialization of two variables. Remember, this whole thing has to be separated by a comma, and there must be a semicolon. Okay, that is one thing. Can I do this here? You notice it is perfectly valid. If it was not valid, I will get a underline red squiggly line there saying that there is a syntax error. This is also valid. You can put a comma separation to separate the variable. Okay, and you can put any type of condition. Condition need not be the true. So I'm going to just run it for those who have an issue, and you notice that it's going to do what is really required. Okay, let's come back to the PowerPoint here. Let's go ahead. How does the for loop works? First, initialization is done. Okay, initialization generally involves setting up the values for the control variables. Okay, then the condition is evaluated. If the condition happens to be true, the body of the loop will be executed. Otherwise, the loop will terminate immediately. The next one, the iteration statement is executed with the final statement. So we have for loop. Inside that you have initialization, then we have condition, then we have iteration, the last part will be executed, and again once it is executed, the condition is tested, and this process is continued until the conditions become false. As told you, instead of declaring the variable and then using it, you can put the declaration as well as initialization in one step. That's allowed. Also, I've told you, you can have two declaration, each separated, two initialization, each separated by a comma. At the same time, you can also have two things getting incremented or decremented, or more, two or more you can have separated by a comma. That's all for today. We will meet again in the next class. Thank you for your interest.